I'm Charles Wells, and you've reached another edition of the Patriot Preacher. Why Trump is the greatest president in our lifetime. I know. This writing is going to send his detractors into an untethered rage. His haters will never be convinced of my assertions, but I'm here to ask people to suspend their dislike for this man personally and at least attempt to be objective for a little bit. This man took office and did not benefit financially whatsoever from taking this position, and will probably be one of the few people who have occupied that chair who have actually lost money while he's been in office. When he ran for president, the Republicans, the Democrats, the big tech industries, Hollywood, mainstream media, institutions of higher learning, they were all against him. Yet he still resonated with enough Americans to get elected with all the odds stacked against him because he made sense and offered to bring back much of what we have lost under typical politicians. You knew exactly what he believed. He didn't tell people one thing or what they wanted to hear and then do something else. He was a problem solver. Politicians are not problem solvers. They continually kick problems down the road, and their solutions are not based in real-life experiences. He believed in the sanctity of life at a time where the pro-choice movement has finally migrated to the moment of birth and beyond. As arrogant as President Trump is portrayed to have been, I've heard him many times give the credit to God and not to himself. He keeps his promises. What a novel concept for a politician. He's about being American first. There's nothing wrong with that. We elected an American president, not the president of the world. So, let's talk about some of his actual accomplishments. Judicial appointments. His appointments to the Supreme Court and our federal courts have been people who were committed to the Constitution as they are supposed to be. Liberals for years have used the judiciary to get through their agendas without having to trouble themselves with legislative hurdles. Constitutionalists always use our founding documents to base their decisions regardless of their personal beliefs. This is what they're supposed to do and in fact swear to do. Stimulating an economy. Lowering taxes and responsible deregulation is the only way to stimulate an economy. Governments do not create wealth or jobs. Private enterprise does. Since private enterprise creates all wealth and jobs, then the only way to stimulate an economy is to create a business-friendly environment. Now, most people are going to identify this as trickle-down economics, Reaganomics, and voodoo economics. What it's actually called, though, is supply-side economics, and it works because it's based upon human behavior. When government gets out of the way, then American people will do the rest. Under his leadership, we're seeing the best economy in my lifetime and some of the lowest unemployment rates ever. Destroying ISIS. President Obama placed all sorts of senseless restrictions on our armed forces in combating terrorism. President Trump took those restrictions off and simply allowed the ground commanders to do what they needed to do to destroy ISIS and gave them the resources to do their job. And the result was a stunningly quick defeat of this terrorist organization. Israeli relations. If you're a fan of Israel, which most Christians are, of course, then no president has been more of a friend to Israel than was Donald Trump. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, something that both President Bush and President Obama had promised to do, but never did, and immediately moved our embassy there. He recognized the Golan Heights as being part of Israel. He brokered a business relationship between Israel and the UAE. This helps peace in the area because business partners, as a rule, have a vested interest in one another, and they don't generally go to war with another. Middle East peace. President Trump did not get us involved in any more military entanglements. Combine this with the fact that he negotiated a treaty between Israel, Bahrain, and the United Emirates, which required both of these powers, by the way, to recognize Israel's right to exist as a nation. And this president, if he had been a Democrat, would have easily garnered himself a Nobel Peace Prize. NATO contributions. For decades, the United States has been footing the bill for Europe's defense. President Trump forced these nations to up their spending for their own defense. Defense of our own borders. President Reagan granted amnesty to several million illegal immigrants to our nation. What he was supposed to get in return, however, was our nation cleaning up and defending our borders so we wouldn't have to readdress this issue again. Fast forward 40 years and you have our politicians throwing open our borders to anyone who wants to come here and they are automatically getting more consideration and benefits than our own countrymen. And even people who are coming here legally. The border has also been a hotbed of drug and gang infiltration, explosion for the sex trade. Building the wall was a common sense measure that was lauded by our Border Patrol. It wasn't an end-all be-all solution, but it gave the Border Patrol time to get there when activity was taking place. I used to work for the Department of Public Safety with the Texas Rangers and Border Patrol. President Trump helped these agencies immeasurably to do their jobs. Trade agreements. For decades, I have heard politicians lament at how there was such an incredible trade deficit between ourselves and trading partners, but no one ever did anything about it. President Trump successfully renegotiated trade agreements with Mexico, Canada, Europe, and China to give the United States a better footing on the international economic stage. The VA. The VA's track record has been atrocious for decades. Any veteran will tell you that. It's a typical government bureaucracy. It was never being held to account for its poor performance. But President Trump cleaned out the dead wood in that agency and made it an agency that was a lot more responsive to the veterans, as it should be. The Iran agreement. President Trump rescinded the Iran peace agreement entered into during President Obama's administration. Folks, when are we going to learn that you don't give evil dictatorships money to stop doing evil things? Because they just do more evil things with the money that you give them. Duh. President Trump actually thinks out the box. He chooses to align himself in agreements with forward thinkers in the Middle East rather than people who are chanting death to America. The Paris Accord. President Trump got us out of the Paris Accord Treaty to fight global warming. First, we should never subjugate American policy to global accords. Secondly, man-made global warming is the single biggest scientific hoax to ever be perpetrated on mankind. And if you don't believe this, just refer to my video on the greatest scam. Space Force. President Trump created a new and versatile armed forces category called Space Force. It is a forward-thinking concept predicated on the technological advances we have made over time in space communications, warfare, and travel. Healthcare. While he fell short of completely getting rid of the Affordable Health Care Act because of Republicans, the tax mandate was taken out. No longer were people being punished for not having government-run health care. And, we shouldn't have to go to the government for health care. The government does nothing well, and they shouldn't be in the business of health care. Both Medicaid and Medicare are destined to go broke. The Affordable Health Care Act was anything but affordable, with premiums more than doubling for people who could least afford them. Why would anybody think entrusting government agencies with our health care is smart or prudent? Judicial system reforms. In 2018, President Trump signed the groundbreaking First Step Act. It's a criminal justice bill which enacted reforms that made our justice system fair and helped former inmates successfully return to society. This act addressed inequities in the sentencing laws that disproportionately harmed Black Americans and reformed mandatory minimums that created unfair outcomes. This act expanded judicial discretion in the sentencing of nonviolent crimes, and over 90% of those benefiting from this retroactive sentencing were Black Americans. The First Step Act also provided rehabilitative programs to inmates, helping them successfully rejoin society and not return to crime. Private investment. Nearly 9,000 areas in the country were designated as opportunity zones. This was designed to attract more than $100 billion from private industry in economically deprived areas. Manufacturing. We were told in 2015 by President Obama that our manufacturing jobs were never going to return, and he accused Trump of using a magic wand to accomplish this. Trump indeed brought back more than 400,000 manufacturing jobs during his tenure. The police. Trump supports our police forces. While individual instances of abuse should always be looked at, would you really want to be a police officer in today's climate? I know I wouldn't. I've worked directly with the police, and I can tell you from personal experience that most of these people are trying to do a job that other folks wouldn't want to do. The Democrats are wanting to defund the place and use these funds for their own pet projects. Meanwhile, the people who will be most harmed are the people in the inner cities who need more policing and not less. The military. Trump enthusiastically supports our military and gives them the infrastructure and assistance they require to do their job. He completely revitalized our military and genuinely supports them. Energy independence. You know, for the first time in 75 years, we have become the leading exporter of energy in this country. And it's directly related to President Trump's philosophies. Our energy production and exportation were matched by no one. We were no longer forced to align ourselves with rogue nations to maintain our energy needs. Pro-life. President Trump is one of the biggest pro-life presidents we've had in a long time. School choice. He supported school choice for all children, so poor children aren't limited to going to poor and underperforming schools. Pharmaceutical reform. President Trump had been pursuing lowering drug costs for all Americans, but received, of course, no help from Congress. Voter ID. President Trump is for voter ID laws. This would go a long way in getting rid of voter fraud. This is not a radical thing to ask, folks. Identification is required for almost everything we do in life. IDs are needed to drive, to cash a check, to enter into a bar, to purchase alcohol and tobacco products, to make transactions at your bank. Why then is it somehow racist to ask to show an ID to vote? COVID-19. President Trump was demonized on how he handled COVID-19, yet he was the first one to react back in late January of 2020 when he suspended all travel from China to the United States, and in return he was called a racist. We also have 2 of our effective vaccines from 2 American companies that he helped personally to fast track in only 10 months after the first case was identified in the United States. So what I'm asking you is to stop allowing your dislike for this president to guide the way you want this nation to be governed. Stop allowing media to interpret national and world events for you. Every large city has been run nearly exclusively by Democrats for the past 50 years, and all the problems that were plagued these cities are still there in abundance. What we are getting with President Biden is the exact opposite of President Trump, and I can tell you it's not good. He's been in office for 47 years, and you cannot name a single notable thing he's done in that time, and he's never been right on a single foreign policy ever. You know, we're going to get higher taxes, the border's going to be open, the Green New Deal will destroy energy jobs, insane unemployment compensation will hinder people going back to work, rejoining the Paris Accord and rejuvenating the old Iran agreement. Elements of socialism will creep into American life while he appeases his most radical constituents. Partial birth abortions will become normalized. Christians will be ridiculed as they always are. Conservatives will continue to be silenced. And they are attempting to pack the Supreme Court with people who don't care about the Constitution. They're trying to add new states to give Democrats the edge in the Senate. In other words, they are about to make power moves, or try to, that will permanently change our country forever. They want to nationalize voter laws to steal what elections they cannot legitimately earn. They will do whatever it takes. We are all Americans, and we should only be wanting what is best for all Americans, regardless of the label that has been put on them. Stop listening to those who are pandering to your demographic group. If America is doing better, then everyone in America will do better. When the river rises, all boats float, big and small. As a side note, President Trump may not be the most politically correct man in the world, but he is not a racist. I would much rather have someone who says what they mean and has what's best for America in the center of their heart than someone who sounds presidential but bows to their party line and enriches themselves. You've been listening to another edition of the Patriot Preacher, and I am Charles Wells. If you've been liking what you've been hearing, please hit that subscribe button below, and as usual, I will see you next time. Good night and God bless.